Hello, Lyle. Happy 80th birthday. I've prepared a little something for you out of appreciation for how you've got me back in contact with my roots after 50 years of virtual absence from Indiana and where my roots are. Um, so I'm very grateful. You know what you've done, and I hope this little collection of slides and a photo essay will express my gratitude adequately. So here we go. I have to find, um, and just bear with me here as I do the housekeeping. Um, and there we are. And I'll start right off here to Lyle on his 80th birthday. You were such a happy baby, Lyle. But what happened? What happened along the way? Uh, I kid you. I kid you. You kid the people we love, and I love you, man. So let's go to the real you. And what you have done over the years. First, you made your parents very happy, and you were always studious from the very beginning, and you were always good at event planning. You were a perfectionist. So here, something is not satisfying you about the way this event is organized. But all work, no play. You've got to relax um, and do your thing. Um, and you have developed gourmet tastes that will prepare you in your search for the perfect pork tenderloin, which I hope you found yesterday. Um, and soon you were the big brother, uh, happy to be a big brother. And then there were three, and you were the alpha. And during this time, as we've reminisced, we all listened to Uncle Wally read the funnies. Uh, and I was doing the same, not far from you, on 54th and Roslyn. Um, my uh, father was like the father in Christmas Story, only instead of going to the basement to attack the furnace, he had to go to the basement to attack our sump pump because we lived very near the Bacon swamp, and you gave me information on that swamp and where it fit into the history of Indianapolis. On one of your many guided tours of me and John Rayburn, you drove by our house and helped me find it, 54th and Roslyn. My father had taken a job entry level at Eli Lilly, and you also drove us by Eli Lilly. Um, and after he got a promotion, we moved to Delaware. You drove us by there as well. And the day after we moved in, the welcoming committee arrived in the person of this very polite and courtly young man who thrilled my mother that I was going to have such a well-behaved friend. And she was right. We grew up together and graduated from school 84. Close up here, uh, is me right here, Rayburn here, and next to Ev Stone, who enters the story at this point. Um, and she will bring in Harry Dawson into our orbit, or as Kurt Vonnegut terms, a caress in Cat's Cradle. Just last month, you sized up the School 84 neighborhood correctly. Um, and you sent me this story um, about the latest chapter in the saga of School 84, which started maybe 20 years ago when a lot of parents in the neighborhood had pulled their students out of school and sent them to private school because their School 84 wasn't doing as well with college prep at that time. So the school district responded by turning School 84 into a magnet school. And that's what we found when we came back for the 50th reunion that you had set up. Mary Jane Randolph organized a School 84 tour, and we found that half the school was ethnic, and they all had iPads. It was quite advanced. It was quite something. Um, but we did hear grumblings during the reunion from some of our classmates who had grandkids that were living near School 84, and there had been a change of heart among the parents in the local neighborhood that maybe School 84 wasn't so bad after all. So they clamored to be able to get their kids into this excellent magnet school. And some arrangements were made, but it, it was a zero-sum game. So whatever students went from the local area, that meant that fewer schools, students could go from um, the less advantaged areas from which um, the school was pulling, drawing in. And so the accusation with this backpedaling on the original vision of the um, uh, magnet schools was, hey, wait a minute, we're disadvantaging the minorities here. And so the principals who had bought in on this concept had noticed the change in the feeling of the school. And so they agreed that maybe you shouldn't be advantaging the parents that lived in the local neighborhood, that we should return to the original concept of the magnet school. So that's what this recent article was talking about, the protest of the diluting of the concept of the magnet school. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. At the 2014 reunion, you drove me by my old house on New Jersey. That was the third house that we lived in. And living in that house was Mark Lubbers. And Donnie Flutterjohn knew Mark as well as did, obviously, you and Deborah. Mark was a political consultant who worked for your brother-in-law, but also a historian. And so Flutterjohn, who'd played basketball in our backyard, told Mark, who had lived there before. And so at the 50th reunion, I'm sorry, the 55th reunion, Donnie arranged for Mark to give me a tour of how the house had changed. And this is another view of the house down the driveway. And then it was this area in the back where the basketball court was, where Donnie and others had come over to play. And I want you to just notice the house behind, across the fence, over on Washington Street. Um, and that's this house taken from Washington Street. Um, and you can see the back of my house on New Jersey, and this is where the basketball court was. And Dr. Alvey and his family lived here, and we were friendly. But Lyle, you noticed that these two houses were mirror images of each other. In your searches, looking for a house that looked like this, you stumbled onto the house right behind us, the Alves house, and that's just uh, we never realized that living there all those years that the two houses were mirror images of each other. So I thank you for picking that up. The other thing that you helped me with was Union Station. I have fond memories, very nostalgic feelings about Union Station. So at the 55th reunion, I went there, and I remember the lobby and the exhibition hallway over here. And of course, you had information about the exhibition display cases, which had been moved to the fairgrounds. That level of detail on the experiences of that I had as a kid is just absolutely stunning, amazing. And I also, it was very nice going inside the Union Station. It's been turned into a hotel exhibition center with some trying to preserve some of the ambience. This is the conference room. And then upstairs, because they had the train tracks were elevated to avoid interfering with traffic around the station. Um, they have kept a train on the tracks, the original tracks, and have converted the uh, uh, train cars into hotel rooms. Quite something. Um, and all around, you see these white statues kind of recapturing the ambience of times gone by. The other haunt of my childhood that you help us reconnect with was 54th and College. And Rayburn and I frequented this corner where Silver's drugstore was located. And of course, they had a huge magazine rack where John and I would stand perusing the periodicals. Here next door is Sam's Gyro Shop. Now, on a previous visit, I had noticed above Sam's Gyros this ad, and it really struck me. This is not an ad that we would see in California. It just wouldn't. A guy with no legs um, steering for a fellow with no arms who's pedaling, touting teamwork. And it just made me think about the humor sensibilities of our neighborhood and who came out of our neighborhood. And we found at the Vonnegut Museum that the founder of Mad Magazine, one of his influences was Vonnegut. And MAD was one of the uh, uh, publications that Rayburn and I perused at Silver's Pharmacy. Um, and also in the neighborhood, at growing up at 61st and Winthrop, had been Dan Wakefield, who was 10 years older than us. Vonnegut was 20. And then there's this kid who is 6 years younger than us, um, who lived not very far, who grew up not very far from 54th and Roslyn, at um, 55th and Indianola. And you can see back here the swamp, Bacon Swamp, that I was referring. It was totally swampy and undeveloped when I was growing up. And going down there and exploring was a great adventure. Some of it has been drained, and some of it has just been turned into a lake, taking advantage of the very high water table there. The other thing that you helped me understand was the canal, which goes right through Broad Ripple. And there, it's amazing when you go back and say, what's this about? And where you were growing up, you just accepted it was the canal. You didn't ask any questions. You didn't have the curiosity. There was too much else going on. But knowing that the urban redevelopment had uncovered the extension of the canal through downtown. I think when we were growing up in the 50s, we had no idea that the canal extended downtown because it had been covered. And you opened me to the whole history of the canal in Indiana by doing your research and finding this issue of the Indiana historian. The question I had was, well, if the canal in our neighborhood extended downtown, how did it get across Fall Creek? And we explored that together. You came up with the answers and the photographs to show the aqueduct that had to be built to get the canal across Fall Creek, answering one of my questions. And this shows the map of the area to the north of the crossing, and then this is the area to the south east of the crossing. And this is what it looked like downtown before they covered it over in the industrial development era of the city. And then it the idea, the vision was to connect into the whole system of canals that was supposed to connect the Erie Canal with the Ohio River. It was a big project, started during the tail end of the building on and expanding during the end of the Andrew Jackson administration. And it was going to happen until the Depression that arguably was caused by his administration. But here it is now downtown, and concerts are held on, and it was just amazing to learn about the destiny that little canal was going to have on downtown Indianapolis and its urban renewal project. So you, I think the intrepidness, the doggedness of you're going after answers is captured in this picture. Your determination and your grit to find answers. I think it probably is what made you a successful journalist. And you were clearly the alpha male in your neighborhood, um, and um, this shows that you also had an attraction for the ladies, if that's acceptable to say anymore. And the question is with Connie Corson here and others, were you a babe magnet in your era? And here you are again with Connie and Roger. Um, and we get to high school and we team up in our pursuit of the opposite sex. Um, and here you are at that same era where we would wear Bermudas with knee socks, the fashion. I certainly had mine. And this is my anonymous informant's comments on this picture. I thought I had to share. Um, and here we are in the Key Club, and our current indie Zoom group. Everybody's here. Here's Dickie. Here's you. Here's me. Here's Van Meter. Um, and here's Rayburn. And here's Harry, who is clearly the alpha male in this group somehow. Um, and here are the women folk that we were pursuing, and what were they excited about? We all know the answer. This is a basketball game. Familiar faces. Linda Bender, who points out that she turned 80 before you did, and so she's the older woman whom you should respect. I pass that message on. Chris, Connie, and other recognizable faces. This is from a documentary, and there was a certain minute where a second where this appeared, and I did the freeze frame and took a picture of it. And this was our attempt to join in that enterprise freshman basketball team. 7-Eleven, here you are with right next to Coach Beeman, who had been a teacher for me at School 84. And here I am, along with Donnie Fletter, John Lou Jenkins, John Strickland, you know everybody here, since you know everybody in our class. But we did not make it to the next level. John Woody certainly did. Fletter John made it all the way through Butler, taking it to the level even after that. And so this was the next level, the Coliseum of Dreams for us and Hoosier March Madness. And the movie, I think, doesn't really capture the drama of the Milan victory in '54 when Bobby Plump held the ball on his hip for 4 or 5 minutes. It just was very dramatic in a Zen kind of way. And I wish they had somehow captured how the whole state was going crazy during those minutes. And this photo is labeled this sectional. So this was something we were doing in between games, or I don't know where exactly we were. Maybe you can tell me later, old friend. Um, You also recommended I go to the Indiana Museum, and they correctly identified the two teams that caught our imagination, the Milan team in 54 and the Addicts team in the 55 and 56. And we were familiar with Oscar Robertson. I saw him practice in the early season when he was just a sophomore, when School 84 went down to play School 45 in the Addicts gym. And then I followed very closely his feeling that his teams did not get the same level of celebration that white teams did, and how that was addressed 60 years later when they asked Oscar to become the marshal of the 500. And that was one of his requests, which I was very proud of the city for honoring. A ride in the fire truck with his teammates and cheerleaders around the circle. Um, Another Hoosier basketball legend, which I have to school my friends in California, is John Wooden is a Hoosier. He played for Purdue, and his success at UCLA was built on Hoosier roots. This is the uh, interstate monument downtown to him. I'm sure there's been some discussion about that. The but you had other options besides basketball. You were a multi-sport guy, and I think this picture captures the shock and awe on the members of the Howe track team at your prowess. Um, the other episode in our lives and in our history was a little bit darker. And believe it or not, this was in the 59 yearbook. Steve Smalley bringing in some family heirlooms to his U.S. history class with Mr. Bliss. Um, and you and I talked about this, and as soon as this story came out, you sent me a copy. It had been based on a more recent book by James Madison that you familiarized me with, and this was an article about it in a periodical. And this was indicative of an openness to the past and looking critically at the past. Um, and the museum does the same thing, takes the subject head on. Um, and here they conceptualize it as the melting pot boils. Um, Also captured in this mural, not sweeping it under the rug. And when I visited the Lubbers, Mark and I had a long talk at his kitchen about his interest in history. And he, at that point, was researching to do a book that would include information about the 1920s and the industrial development of Indianapolis, and how at that time the city fathers rejected the idea of assembly lines, big factories in Indianapolis, because it would have necessitated the accepting of immigrants. And the wave of immigrants at that particular time was Arab immigrants. And of course, they wound up in Dearborn, Michigan, which it's a suburb of Detroit, which really then became more the automotive capital. They had other advantages, and Indianapolis is the largest city without a navigable river, so that was a disadvantage without a waterway. But Mark is looking at other factors and why Indianapolis did not develop more automotive industry. Um, so you graduated, and it was a family affair. Um, and the story of my graduation is a little bit related to how I um, lost contact with my roots. Um, in the middle of senior year, my father was sent to San Diego by Lily. And I elected to stay with my family. I felt it was necessary at the time. Maybe I had a little bit of senioritis. Maybe the beach in Southern California didn't sound so bad. And I never really learned to surf well, but body surfing was fit me just fine as a swimmer from all the time I spent at Rivi. Um, and um, I did come back though to graduate with you, um, alone without my family, and I mooched off of a lot of people, the Rayburns, the Dawsons, but the one house that I remember most, and I think it was the last house I stayed in before returning home, was your house. And as I recall, I extended my stay there because of the generosity of your mother, who treated me like her fourth son. And I don't have a picture of it, but I have a picture of her uh, with Dickie, who'll be my stand-in. But I felt very accepted. It was an unhappy time for me. Coming back had not been what I thought it would be. It was being away for 6 months at that particular time left me outside of a lot of things. And so I think I was hurting a little bit, and you and your mother particularly were comforting and supportive. And I'll never forget you, and in particular your mother and her spaghetti meals. Um, so then there's a 20-year gap, a huge blind spot. In fact, I couldn't remember which one of the many reunions you were running that I actually came back for all the way from California. But it was when you summarized uh, earlier reunions, and there was this picture of me with Louis Jenkins. Um, and I had visited Louis on his farm, where I think this picture was taken, and Louis, I think, submitted it to you, thinking that it was noteworthy for obvious reasons. Um, and so it was the 20th, and I came back and reconnected briefly. But then it was another 30-year interval where I was busy with my career and raising kids. So that really amounted to 50 years of detachment. And so that's why coming back for graduation, and then at the other bookend, the 50th reunion was so healing and so important for me. So in that 30 year period, between the 20th reunion and the 50th reunion, you had your own life that I was only dimly aware of. And I understand that you dated around for a while in your life. But boy, did you hit the jackpot as we as I discovered at the 50th. I would see Harry and Ev every year or two during those intervals, so I wasn't totally in the dark. But it wasn't until the 50th when I met Deborah that I realized how fortunate you had been, and the world that she introduced to you. Um, uh, Amazing, and no one deserved it better than you, Lyle. But to see you two together is really wonderful. And here you are with your brother-in-law and Joe Paterno, which was taken, as I understand, as a joke for somebody else who was not a Paterno fan. Um, and you have set the standard for reunion management, my friend. To see you operate at all the reunions, to see how smoothly things run, um, and uh, you're always there orchestrating and organizing. And it was at the 50th reunion that something very important happened right next to your refrigerator, your and Deborah's refrigerator in your kitchen. Rayburn and I reconnected after 37 years because he had missed the 20th reunion. And uh, we just went back to the third grade together and reviewed everything, and it was just amazing to reconnect with him in that way, and it's been reinforced every 5 years in your backyard and patio. Every evening of the reunion, you've opened your house and you've been so generous with us. And it was very gracious of you to agree to see my son, the journalist, Jeremy, who was pursuing the violent protest story across the nation. And he texted me that he was approaching Indianapolis and could he stop and meet one of my friends that I'd been talking about all these recently, since 2009. That was during COVID, and you graciously accepted him out on with social distancing on that very patio where you've entertained us so well. So after the 2009 50th, there was a core of us who took a road trip centered around Dickie's vacation home in the Pecos Mountains. And here we are. We're about ready, Harry and I, to ditch our wives who are going to some sort of spa. And the five of us take off and spend almost a week together. Lyle photoshopped this photo, but then he tried to make up for it by putting me back in, but he substituted the others with somebody else. An example of Lyle's humor. So, and particularly after 2014, but also after the other two reunions um, since 2009, you've given Rayburn and I guided tours. And this one is of the Vogue Theater and that star. And there was a whole story behind that was told in this book, Naptown Memories by a Raymond Featherstone, who is 10 years older than we. And um, he talked about how it was Mary Pickford who had suggested the name Vogue Theater, and then a cowboy star of the day, Ken Maynard, had laid the brick, first brick, and Carol Lombard was there with her boyfriend, Clark Gable. And 26 other movie stars all signed that star with who these are all the people with Hoover connections. And your comment was, sure, Hoover connections, they pass through or fly over once upon a time in their careers. But you did know that Carol Lombard's family had a cottage up north. The other, one of the many places you took us to, it was Woodruff a place, which was so interesting to me. I had no idea it existed. And you have houses like this that, if you saw the film Magnificent Ambersons, you saw these houses. The very beautiful Victorian houses. And the story of the Magnificent Ambersons really resonated with me because of a movie, but also the theme of Booth Tarkington's book, which was about the established wealth versus the nouveau riche, the entrepreneurs. And then there was also a meditation on the effect of the automobile on society that was part of that epic story. And you've continued to provide Rayburn and I with interesting tidbits of historical documentation. This is a map of northern Indianapolis in 1870, with the Monon Railroad. You've pointed out the architecture that maybe we noticed when we were growing up, but didn't think too much of. The Middle Eastern themes. And I did notice at the airport a prayer room, which we don't have in California. That's the first time I've seen a prayer room in an airport. The other nostalgic place you took us to, of the many, I'm just mentioning a select few, was the Victory Field, which has been preserved, even though there are living units around it. And we all remember going to Victory Field, particularly night games, coming out the night darkness and seeing the bright lit green landscape. Kurt Vonnegut, this is from the new museum. And I'll give you just a second to read his words. And this is what the director of the museum had to say. There's a lack of arrogance here and a humility that is distilled in his prose, and I think that's true. Um, and then came the 60th, most recent reunion, and of course you put together one of your great montages. Um, and you're the reunion champion in my mind. I tell friends what I experience at reunions, and it's unprecedented. They can't believe it, and it's all because we have you leading the show, old friend. You do all the organizing, the communications, the coordination. the brokering of relationships, hurt emotions for one reason or another, us being humans. And you do all that and you document what's going on. So you're the Lion King of reunions, my friend. But you're also a very humorous king. You're also the court jester, the master of ceremonies. And here in the montage, you're J. Fred Murphy. I also appreciate your ongoing catalog of wisecracks about and bon mots about aging. So here are just a few examples of the montages, which I'm sure each one is a labor, but a labor of love in your case. And so we come to the end. I'll give you a second to read that. But there's always a Hoosier doing something very important. And you have done something very important, not just for me, especially for me, given my detachment from Indianapolis for 50 years, but you've done something for the whole class, which I've witnessed the coming together, the bringing together, the preservation of our common past in the 50s, in a unique age when education, you could argue, was at its height in 1950s Indianapolis. Particularly, I would say probably North Indianapolis, Broad Ripple, and Short Ridge. So something very important, and reliving that through your efforts, I'm filled with gratitude. So I will end with this, and a happy birthday, uh, old friend, and many more. And at this point, I'll say goodbye.